Good to go. Kwesi Asante from Camden, Delaware. 3 hours away, so apologies for being late. I'm not used to the New York traffic. I live in the country, so yeah, I saw the traffic. It was crazy. So my wife and daughter are parking the car now. You know, competitive shooting. I traveled all over the country to compete. You know, I tell the story of, you know, I'm also a fire instructor, information security, so I used to do digital forensics, now I do compliance for a cloud hosting provider. I got into competition shooting, I got into shooting in general, because I was at a Chick-fil-A one time and I was eating, and this white guy came by and he ice grilled me, he looked at me and he pulled up and he showed me his gun. I wasn't into it, you know, I was a big guy, and this was a run up to the Trump election, you know, that first time, and he wanted to show me his gun. So for me, I was just like, yeah, I know he didn't just do that, but he did, right? So, you know, you know, I grew up, you know, I can handle everything, you know, physically, right? So, you know, I just felt like I could. But for this time, I felt the first time that I felt vulnerable. Like the world was changing, not to say that racism wasn't prevalent, but it wasn't overt racism. You weren't seeing, you know, them call us nigger, right? They weren't in Delaware. There's a Trump sign in every fucking house. Sorry. Big Trump sign everywhere you go. So, you know, we're you know, it's right at the Mason-Dixon line. It's a very racist state, especially where I live. And so I knew that there was a change, and he sat down, and then he got back up. And the other thing is I had my I Can't Breathe sweater on, so that was the trigger for him, right? So he saw that, okay, he's one of those guys, right? So I wasn't in the guns, I didn't grow up with guns, but then he did it again. He came by again, and he went and showed me his little pistol, and for me, I was just like, yo, this is. I remember the manager at the Chick-fil-A. She was just like, I was just like, yo, he can just do that? Because everybody saw it. And they're like, yeah, it's an open carry state. And I was like, what the fuck is that? What does that mean? Right? I wasn't into guns. You don't understand. Like, I wasn't, you know, I just, you know, I just wasn't into it. I didn't know the laws. It wasn't something that I was taking on. And, but that changed my life because, you know, that next day, I went and said, okay, all right. I went and we bought his and her pistol, right? So I bought this Smith & Wesson and a PX4 Storm. It's a 40 cal Beretta PX4 Storm. And but what I also saw was that I didn't want to just be like everyone else. And this is what I'm going to push you guys to understand. Purchasing a firearm has nothing. There's no benefit just to buy a gun and not actually use it, right? Not to be trained in it. It'll actually be a negative to you if you just buy one of those firearms. If you're buying a firearm, you're not immediately buying a holster with it. You're on the negative. So if I say right now, go grab your firearm, and the first thing you got to go do is unlock, you're not serious about using it. I know that. If you're not dry firing at least once or twice a day to get your weapons manipulation down, where you're working on your draw, you're working on your reloads, you're working on indexing, sight picture, you're not serious. And so I implore everybody, I'm not gonna get too much into it, I want everybody to do what they gotta do, but that we take it to our next level. And for me, my thing was, I don't wanna just do it like everyone else. I wanna fucking master it. Right. I wanna be able to then take that, and I want to be able to teach black people. I focus on black people, right? That's my focus. I want them to be able to take that and teach their children. This is going to be a generational thing that we're going to take in, not just for ourselves, but we need to pass this shit to our families. Not just buying these guns, training with them to be just as deadly, if not deadlier. We make up 13% of the population. We should have we are men and women, we're obligated to make sure that if we can take out a ratio of 5 to 1, that was my obligation, that I want to be that deadly. You know, and we have to think that way because it's not like, no, I'm not saying, yo, we need to go to war with white people, but we have an obligation to protect ourselves. We have an obligation to take it serious, right? So, you know, that's the beginning for me. I'm also the national trainer for the Black Panther Party. So that's another thing that, just to go around and to teach us not to just do these marches, but to actually, to be able to defend yourselves in our communities.
All right, and that's actually I would like to pose, we're gonna pose questions to each individual first, then we're gonna try to chop up the time so that we'll be discussing New York laws, we'll be talking about if certificates of relief of disability, so if you already have a charge, we'll be discussing that. But we want to just get an insight on to some of the people here on the panel to give you insight on who you're dealing with here. So I want to pose a question to Sister Jenkins first, and it was about what motivated you to join in the filing on that amicus brief that the recent Supreme Court just overturned?
So the brief was actually written by some public defenders at the Bronx Defender Services. They contacted the Black Attorneys of Legal Aid and asked for us to join in the brief. So I, along with my co-reps, we read the brief and we liked the arguments. Essentially, there is a Second Amendment right as of 2008 for us to bear arms in self-defense. And I believe that if we have a constitutional right, then it should apply to all Americans, regardless of their race, obviously. What we see happening in New York City is that, or New York State, is that people are aggressively prosecuted for the mere possession of a firearm. Not only in cases where they possess the firearm outside their homes, and not only in cases where they possess the firearm under circumstances even seeing an intent to use the firearm unlawfully. I'm talking about just mere possession of firearms by itself. And it doesn't matter if you have a criminal record or if you're a law-abiding citizen. Even as a law-abiding citizen, you're going to be arrested and charged, likely, with a Class C violent felony. That carries a minimum of 3 years mandatory prison sentence. And it's actually a range of 3 to 15 years that you're facing. And the consequences begin at arrest, right? So, the ADA is the district attorney is likely going to request high bail, and the judge is likely going to set that high bail, which means that if you're indigent, which all of my clients are, it's very likely that you're going to be fighting your case from inside of New York City's most visible badge of slavery, Rikers Island, where 23 people have died in the last year alone. And that is, that's just speaking to the mental and emotional harm that pretrial incarceration causes. Pretrial incarceration also causes a loss of family, a loss of employment, a loss of housing, strains family ties, and strains community ties. So it really ruins lives, and this is all before you're even prosecuted, or you're even tried for the crime with which you're charged. So like I said, it's a Class 3 violent felony. It carries a minimum of 3 years prison sentence in the best case scenario, meaning you have no criminal record, no prior arrests. You have employment, ties to the community, you have family. The standard offer in New York City is going to be 2 years of prison time plus 2 years of post-release supervision. So you're talking about 4 years where you're going to be essentially a ward of the state, I'll say. And then, of course, most people are going to receive prison time. And even if you don't receive prison time, you are going to walk away a violent felon, and that's a lifetime label. And that carries with it its own set of collateral consequences, including discrimination in housing, discrimination in employment, discrimination in education. Again, it also may cause you to lose your children. You can lose custody of children. You can lose property rights.
I would like to know, in your opinion, to you, what would a racially just gun law look like to you?
So I've thought about this quite a bit, and honestly, I guess what would be racially, the only way I think that it would be racially just is if it were permitless carry. Any other sort of law is going to leave us subject to some sort of, well, it's probably going to include some sort of discretion. And that is always going to leave Black and brown people in a precarious situation. So I would say that without permitless carry. Then a racially just gun law would be one that obviously does not intend to prevent certain groups of people from possessing firearms. It would limit the discretion that the licensing authority has in determining who can and cannot get a license. The good moral character requirement is an issue. I think that there need to be clear criteria that, like guidelines that the licensing authority can use to determine good moral character. It's not something that they just decide, based on the language that's in the current New York statute.
So,
or the new statute.
so with that being said, so what are your overall thoughts on the new New York State gun law?
So, it's, as an attorney, I'm gonna say it's difficult to say because we haven't yet seen it in practice, so we don't actually know what's going to happen. What I can say is that I don't think it's going to be any easier for us to obtain firearms licenses. It certainly isn't going to be any easier for us to carry in public. It's going to be much more difficult.
So what are some of the benefits that you feel are associated or that's associated with training early?
The first time a firearm was put in my hand, I was
Speak up.
maybe 7 or 8 years old. Okay, when a firearm was first put in my hand. I have an uncle who at the time was Air Force veteran, national judo champion, and he was a gunsmith. So he made guns, many of them custom pieces. And my father's one of 19 children, so this particular uncle was not in the habit of, well, let's hide it from them. He was in the habit of, I'm not hiding my belongings. They will learn safe and responsible behavior with firearms because it's something that's going to be around. At some point, they're going to be in the world, and rather they learn everything here in regards to anything than they learn it outside. So I was about 7 or 8 years old. I did the same. My son, who's here with my husband, I didn't start him early, but he's a licensed carrier as well. None of us are law enforcement. So, we believe that. My grandson is 7 years old. At 2 years old, Brother Kwasi had mentioned something about dry firing. And at 2 years old, my grandson, I would sit him on my lap. I would sit up on my bed, put my back against my headboard, put a target on the wall, at the end of the bed, and I would put his little 2-year-old hands around the grip of my firearm, put my hands over his hands, and practice my trigger discipline on my firearm. When I tell you I started that at 2 years old with him, and at 7, he has an amazing trigger discipline. He has an amazing, I haven't even taken him to the range to use live fire, and we're starting that. We're getting ready to start that. But when I tell you we have Nerf wars in the house, he has one-shot Nerf guns and rifles and so on and so forth.
So why do you feel that is important for the sisterhood to be a part of the firearm game insofar as the art form?
Well, there's 2 reasons why I find it very important for sisters to get involved in firearm training. One is, believe it or not, whether you are 4'11" or 5'11", you are a soft target. I don't care how hard you think you are, how tough you are, if you're from the neighborhood, a community, the hood, you are a soft target. Many times we're walking around alone. We have our hand on a cell phone, not really paying attention. We have a pocketbook on one arm, bags in hands, not really paying attention. We have a pocketbook on our hands, a stroller, or children. We're in heels, too busy being cute. Cute is fine, but what are you actually paying attention to? You are the soft target.
Indeed.
So training is important for you because although you're not going to beat everybody, the idea is to have a leg up. See it coming before it possibly comes. Knowing what to do, that if they get the jump on you, you have that long to react or not react. That's going to be the difference between you living, dying, or at least getting away. And it doesn't have to be firearms training. I've studied martial arts. I've studied boxing. I've studied, of course, firearms training. I've studied tactical. You need to do something.
Right.
And you
Right.
need to do it with your children.
Right.
And there's no age that it needs to start at.
That's really interesting, because that's a good segue and a lead into the next question. At what age do you think that's appropriate to train our babies now at this point in time?
Like I said, I started my grandson at 2 with just dry firing, which is just getting him comfortable and seeing that this is not a toy, this is real. And it actually helped his hand-eye coordination.
I mean, there's some medicinal benefits to this art form.
Right, absolutely.
You know, it's
So
great.
you can start as young as 2.
Right.
I would say for dry firing, start young. For live firing, there isn't an age. It's based on discipline and maturity. If you're, I know 30-year-olds that I will not take to the range because they don't listen.
Right.
Truly, they will not listen, they know everything, and that's not safe. Whereas my grandson is 7, I will take him any day, every day, and put a 22 in his hand with a live round in it. So it would be up to you as the parent and the disciplinarian to know your child or whoever you're taking. The younger the better. They're sponges when they're young.
Right.
Just like you can teach them second language,
Right.
you can teach them any discipline.
I agree with that. Thank you, my love. Brother Robert, now that this law has been passed, can I carry you now in New York?
Again, everybody, my name is Robert Schechter. I'm an attorney. Now, all the Supreme Court decision came down, which in the event you're not familiar, there was a case that over the last 4 or 6 years sort of made its way through the federal court system and got before the Supreme Court. And then in a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court said that if you're going to evaluate laws against the Second Amendment, we have to look at them in the lens of the history, text, and tradition, which meant that if you're going to pass a law, it had to be a law that, in essence, was in effect in 1776.
Mm-hmm.
This means that most, if not all, gun regulations under that lens would be unconstitutional. It's just going to take some time to slowly chip away at those things. But right now, that law that challenged of proper cause was that the proper cause standard was unconstitutional, and proper cause was what made New York may issue and was up to the discretion of the licensing officer or the judge or in the city, the MIPD, whether you were able to establish that you had some special need greater than the general public and the people in your same profession or same neighborhood. They specifically, under the proper cause standard, were denying people who said, I live in a neighborhood that's incredibly dangerous. And they said, I don't care. That doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean everyone in the neighborhood gets to have one. You're not going to get one. And what we saw in any place that had the May issue scheme was corruption. People went to prison for selling permits. People bribed people. They went to typically the incredibly wealthy or people who could establish, people who had been victims of crimes even recently started to have their licenses taken away. Generally the people in power liked to limit who could have guns, and that was the case when the law was originally passed. And what we saw when the governor called in a extreme emergency session was they immediately went to work trying to put in more laws to stop you from being able to. And they identified a whole bunch of places that it was now going to be illegal to carry, even though for over 100 years there was no issue with people carrying in those places. It's now when they could not stop people that they did not want carrying. Now you can't take it in restaurants. Now you can't take it in parks. Now you can't take it into churches. Or what they did was, which I think is going to be the next step, is they then began to make it so that there are places that you can't go. They're sensitive areas. Even though the Supreme Court specifically said you can't say all of New York City is a sensitive area. Right. They then said, all right, Times Square, which again, they didn't even specify. So sort of where does Times Square begin and end?
It's crazy.
It's big. And what you end up with is they want to make it so that you cannot go where you typically go. I think it would not surprise me if ultimately they try to get it banned from apartments or places that take government money or any other places like that, where you're going to try to push people to really limit them. And those will all be challenged. There's challenges going on right now, but the short answer, can you carry me in the city? No. You have to get your license, but they can't deny you for lack of proper cause. But as Ms. Jenkins said, you're going to end up potentially getting denied now under a new arbitrary standard of your judgment, your moral character, which again is another challenge that's going to come into effect. They can no longer say you didn't provide proper cause. They'll just say you were arrested a couple times, and then they got smart. They can't say you were arrested 6 times, we'll deny you. Now they say the facts and circumstances surrounding your 6 arrests are why you got denied. So it's always a game, but the court has thrown everybody a sort of a lifeline in that realistically they can't really keep getting away with it now.
Right.
And you will have recourse.
When does the new New York law go into effect? The one that has just been rendered by the Supreme Court. When does that go into effect for the states that have been affected positively by that?
Well, when the Supreme Court decision was put in, it went into effect sort of immediately. So they then remanded a whole bunch of cases back. Cases that governed magazine capacity. Right. Cases that governed what would be considered an assault weapon, which would just be a rifle that's typically in common use. They sold millions of them, and New York's saying you can't have them. They're often the best weapon in self-defense if you have multiple people coming against you. They're also generally affordable, and they went out of their way to send these back and say that all these courts that previously said the assault weapons ban were constitutional have to reconsider this. And they have to go back through the history, text, and tradition and show me in 1776
right.
when this assault weapon was banned. Keep in mind, all the way back then, you could pretty much have whatever you want. People had battleships. Like that, you could have like whatever you really could afford. So I think it's important to sort of look back through the history, text, and tradition. And again, it's an entirely different time. But that's sort of where you have to look at. There was not a lot of gun regulations in that past, and for a regulation to stand, you have to show me that it is there. And if you don't have any proof of it being there, it's presumed unconstitutional. So I'll yield.
All right. So I do want to elaborate on the question that was posed to her about how does competition benefit you, right? So. I've been doing training for, a ton of people, right? And so what I find is that, when you're talking about preparing or preparation to be able to handle a situation, you can't put, the probability of you actually being able to shoot someone or the probability of you being robbed it's a very small probability, right? So competition, what that does is it puts you in a situation where you're forced to perform. You have a ton of people looking at you. You have to shoot these targets. You got to be fast. You got to be accurate. It puts that pressure on you. That are pressure to perform in an environment that that should shake you up, right? So competition shooting also is like, you do this dry fire. Dry fire is weapons manipulation absent of ammo, right? So you're not using, there's no bullets, there's no anything, but you train, you learn how to do all those different things I talked about earlier. But it allows you to, sometimes just doing that is boring, right? without any type of like result. Like again, the probability of you actually doing it is or being robbed or in a situation of self-defense is little. But competition allows you to excuse me, by training and doing those, it gives you a reward, right? So competition does that. So you're training, at least you have a reason to do it through competition, and you have like those weekly matches that you can actually see your progress, like a quantitative number, so you get ranked, right? So there's different classes. You start off with unranked, unclassified, D class, C class, B class A, right? Master and Grandmaster. So you're able to say, okay, this is where I am today, right? What you'll find is, I talk to guys and they're like, yo, especially guys, they'll be like, oh, I can shoot. And then they'll go out. When they go out, they get spanked by this 12-year-old little white girl, right? And then their ego is shot. And so they do one of two things. They're either gonna say, okay, well, damn, I'm not as good as I thought, and then they're gonna train, or they just quit. But it's a good way, especially for guys. Like, we are the most egotistical. We swear we're good. We don't need any help. When that little 12-year-old white girl spanks your ass in that match, you will rethink what you thought. That's what happened to me. Everybody was like, yo, you're good, Quasi. You're good, you're good. Go there, and that little 12-year-old girl, I know who she is. She beat me. And I had to come back. And so I think that it just, again, allows you to train harder, to see where you are really. I'm going to implore you guys not to just listen to, the old military guy that's been in the field for, 30 years. He's going to give you all these pointers. Bullshit. Police can't shoot, okay? Unless they're in some, military, unless you're in like some special forces, they don't touch pistols. They don't train as much as you do in competition. They don't, right? So, and that's why you will find competitive shooters are the ones training the special forces. That's who they use to train them how to, because, I shoot 30,000 rounds a year. You're not going to find that in the police department. You're not going to find that in the military. You don't do that, right? So, I implore you guys just to I don't know if you guys want to skip it. I know I'm going to go around. Training and practice. A lot of people don't even understand the difference between training and practice, right? So training, let's go with practice. Practice, it's something that you already know. You're doing something over and over again. It's something that you already know, right? Training is actually taking in new information and then doing that over and over again. So you have to, I implore you guys to go out and seek training to take in new information, right? Because what's happening is, like, I see it also with all the militia groups that I'm in, right? They just stay within their groups, and it's a groups of ignorance, right? We have to come outside of that ignorance to learn new skills. Because we just keep doing the same thing. We go, we look at the targets, we're excited because the grouping on the target, they have tight groups. But how long did it take you to shoot those groups? If it took you 10 seconds to shoot a 2-inch group, who cares that you shot 2-inch groups? How fast did you do it? We have to challenge ourselves. Competition allows you to do that because you're gonna lose. If you shot that in 10 seconds, you're gonna lose. You better shoot that in less than 3 seconds, right? If you're really, you know what I'm saying? Like even distance shots, you're gonna have to be able to learn how to do it fast and accurate. And if you don't add time and a time element to what you're doing yourself a disservice. I think that kind of goes over the.
And what I want to add on to what my brother is saying. This is an art form. Hold on, let me use that mic.
Yeah, there you go.
I want y'all to hear me clearly here. All right, we want you to understand that shooting is an art form. Okay, here in the community, we get in our heads that I want to get my gun permit, and then I usually want to have a firearm, which more than likely I'm going to turn on someone that looks like me.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talk about the downside or the dark side of firearm ownership in our community. But the art form that this man and this sister is telling you makes shooting magnificent. And these are the truths that are lost on our community. Yes, we could get our firearms, but my brother is telling you, if you can't shoot and you don't know how to align your sights, and one more thing, you need to understand prior to getting into your new lifestyle. This is a very expensive undertaking. Okay? Let me make that clear to you again. Y'all think y'all gonna go get your gun permits, right? And then when you go there, they're gonna tell you to go buy your firearm, right? And then you're gonna have your dream gun, right? You all have one. And when you get your backside in the store, and they talk about 7, 8, 9 on you, then you talk about a holster. And the bullet cost, or the rounds, the prices are through the roof. So understand this, that you must have a little disposable income to enter into the game that we play in for real. Even this one here, he's sitting here all quiet. He's looking like an attorney. Don't you sleep on this man right here. Look, I'm telling you right now, everyone here does this, except our little neophyte on the end. We're going to take care of you. Don't you worry. We're going to bring her into the fold quickly. But we want to understand, I'm trying to bring a little humor to it, but I do want you to understand, this is a costly thing. Yes, sir?
First of all, thank you for the chance to put this forum together. It's good to brother, man. Is it also true for our youth that considering this aspect of it being art?
Yes.
Is it also true that our youth can get into competitive shooting and get paid for college?
We're going to talk into the artistic piece, and when we get into Q&As, what the brother's talking about is the scholarships that are offered to the communities. That John Jay College and Marist College here in New York are the only 2 schools that offer scholarships to shoot. But our children are not taking advantage of this. They want to run up the field and dunk a ball and slide in the third. I would just slide into a degree, just shoot for free. All right, so I mean, there are a myriad of things. What about Olympic competitions that we could get into? All right, we continue to talk about the negative aspects of firearm ownership, but we don't talk about the wonderful things that we could do. The camaraderie, the smell alone of the gunpowder is addictive. But
I died, but it's addictive.
You know, I'm smelling that lead. You know, but I digress. You know, I digress. But we'll do questions after, brother. But I just wanted to say that. So we're going to get back into the panel piece, and I want to turn it back over to Sister Julia because I have a few more questions for you.
Okay.
All right. So I would like to ask about the indiscriminate denials of the people of the Black and brown community that have been denied at a higher rate when they go and apply for their firearm permits. And I want to add a little something into that. I want to talk about the people who qualify in the eyes of the enemy, that didn't have a felony, that didn't fall under some of the rules and regulations that would hinder you. What about that?
Well, honestly, I can't really speak to the people who are denied licenses. I think maybe Robert would probably have more information about that.
Okay.
My expertise is more in the criminal.
In the criminal piece?
Yeah, the criminal aspect of it. I don't ever get to communicate with those people who are denied licenses.
You get the people who already got caught with a firearm?
Charged with a firearm. They may have to be licensed in other states, and then they come to New York, and they're not licensed.
So the reciprocity piece,
it
doesn't apply, so you get into that as well. Would you like to address that, brother?
Yeah, I mean, there's always, at least what we've identified, that people are not prohibited. In New York, it's a felony. They also added in, there's also misdemeanor crimes of domestic violence and felonies that makes you federally prohibited. And New York added what's called a serious offense, which is just an additional bunch of misdemeanors that will just take away your gun rights, generally without you really even knowing it. Some of them are more violent misdemeanors, but one of them is every single criminal possession of a controlled substance is a serious offense. So attempted criminal possession of a controlled substance, which is a B misdemeanor, your lowest level misdemeanor that you can get, you lose your gun rights. You can now, what we saw was people getting arrested for these, applying never being convicted, so they're not prohibited, and then they would have to go and explain arrests from 25, 35 years ago, generally at a higher rate. Again, it sort of depends where you're going, but oftentimes it appeared that the judges would sort of question how you could get picked up and charged with some of these charges, that it appeared that the judges' backgrounds did not necessarily match what some of the people applying for, and it is often very easy to be arrested. When we studied it, we saw that about 25% of all African Americans are arrested and their charges are dismissed, or a dismissed ACD or dismissed non-prosecution, and that rate is about double that of white people. Basically there's many ways you could try to look at that statistic, but it'd be about a quarter. And that we found when you begin to use arrest as a basis to judge people on their moral character, fitness, and judgment, you will have a disproportionate effect on African Americans, Hispanics. The numbers were almost identical for the Hispanic community. And that numbers all came from the Division of Criminal Justice Services. The last time we looked at that was a couple years ago. I do not imagine that the numbers have really changed. They've consistently been around that. But it does appear that there is a overemphasis on having the people in the black and brown community sort of having to explain oftentimes either situations that were outside of their control or the worst moments in their life to try to justify how they're now 25, 35 years ago different. And over time, we've also, in the criminal justice system, one of the tenets is that you're supposed to sort of you're moving on from that and growing, and that's why New York tried to put forward their ability to seal certain convictions, and many people went out and sealed their convictions, whether if you were convicted of up to 2 misdemeanors or 1 felony and 1 misdemeanor, you could seal it. Many people did that, then they went and applied for a gun license or a gun, and they found out they were still prohibited because they wrote into it that it still comes up in relation, it's still there. I mean, it's sealed, but they wanted to make sure that it wasn't expunged. They wanted to make sure that you still have to list it on your applications. They wanted it to still come up on your background if you're trying to buy a firearm. You then had to, and of course some of the things that they chose, if you get caught with a gun, that was one of the things that you were not allowed to seal, no matter how many years. It could be 30, 40 years, it didn't matter. They still didn't. So then you would have to go back and try to figure out how to get your rights back, which no one tells you. You then have to apply for a certificate of relief from civil disabilities or a certificate of good conduct. A certificate of relief from civil disabilities, you have to apply at the court if you were convicted of 1 or less felonies and you did not get state prison. If you were sent to state prison, you cannot apply at the courthouse. You have to apply through the Department of Corrections. The Department of Corrections, at least we've seen over the last 15 or so years, will not restore your gun rights. Now, on the court level, you can apply, and oftentimes, as long as you don't ask or say anything about your gun rights, they will give back to you.
Right.
If you say, I want my gun rights back, then they'll say you can have all your rights back but your gun rights. You don't have to tell them that you want your gun rights back. You just say, I want my rights back. They give you your rights back. Because, again, they probably assume people, they underestimate the number of people who are interested in firearms. Across the board, and I think that should be changing. There is statistics that suggest that more women are getting into it, more African Americans are getting into it.
So what my brother is saying here, all right? Your certificate of relief for disabilities. If you have a jacket or a charge, I would advise you to give this man a call, get his number, talk to Sister Julia as well. This will put you on the road to getting you what you need. He gave you a hint. You're not gonna go in there, okay? I'm saying this publicly, right? You're not gonna go in there actually saying, I want my rights restored so I can give me a gun. you know, we're gonna have to use proper language, okay? But you can't be denied that. And then once you have that in hand along with the disposition that comes with it, okay? You should be on the road to a degree. But I wanted to ask you something, dear brother, and it was this. When the people had applied for their firearm permits in the past, and they were denied, where did they go for redress? Because now in this new law, they're talking about putting together some kind of appeal board now, where anyone who is being denied their firearm permits now, you're gonna have a means to go and sit before a board. But before, they would just deny you and never tell you why, and they'd keep you out. What do we have in there?
If you got denied, each county sort of handled it differently, but at the end of the day, if you would then have to go to court, you'd have to file a Supreme Court action, what was called an Article 78 action, and that you probably had less than 50% chance of success there. And what often would happen is either the Supreme Court judge would say, I agree with the licensing officer because they're the ones who are in the best position to decide whether you should be denied a license or not, and they're going to hold their decision. They could also say, you're right, they're wrong, and you're going to get it. Or what happens a lot would be, I would have ruled differently than the administrative agency. However, I cannot overrule that of the administrative agency.
So with the new decision that is in this, everybody, I want to tell you, you need to get this. It's the state of New York. What is this? The extraordinary session in the Senate. You guys need to pull this up because it will tell you all of the absurd new draconian laws that they're implementing. You have to pull it up. If you don't, come see me at the end. You can take a picture of it. But I need you to take to pull this up online. And you need to edify yourself, you know, so don't be going around here relying on somebody else's information when you should be able to get this information for yourself, all right? So the brother's telling you the means and how you're going to go about getting your firearms. Now, to my dear sister here, you're in a very interesting position for me, and I find it interesting. I'm going to tell you why.
Okay.
Because you are a firearm enthusiast, and you are on the leading edge and moving the sisterhood in that direction. But your beautiful husband here is in the Nation of Islam. Now, how does that work for you?
Right, so with the Nation of Islam, I've been a member of the Nation and the FOI. The Nation of Islam, they don't believe in, they do not carry firearms. I mean, if they carry for work, if they're a police officer or in that line of duty, then they carry. But as a whole, they do not carry. My husband is in the Nation. The brothers, my husband as well as the brothers in the Nation, they do know that I carry. They do know that I train at least twice a week at the tune of 100 to 200 rounds at 50 yards, spot on. And they've been supportive, nothing short of supportive. They also, because they don't carry, they do implement like martial arts and MMA, boxing, that kind of stuff, which I've already trained in. You know,
Yes.
before firearms, or at the time that I was first introduced to firearms, the uncle that put the gun in my hand is a national judo champion. So I started, actually, didn't start with judo, I started with Aikido, dabbled in Hapkido, I fully trained in Taekwondo, and dabbled in Wing Chun. So because I had that balance, I think they kind of gave me a pass on the firearms, the firearms thing.
That's what I'm talking about right there. Sister Julia?
Yes.
Now that you're a part of the firearm conversation and that you have been a part of the brief that has been submitted and you have played a major role, I would like to think, and moving us forward out of what was it, a centuries-old madness. What's your position, and how do you feel about becoming involved in the art of firearm ownership and firearm operations? Talk to me.
Well, what I can say is I think that my involvement in the brief was quite by accident, but it's really been a blessing in disguise. I am from Los Angeles, California. My family is from the South, but growing up in Los Angeles, it isn't a city where people generally possess firearms in the same way that they do in the South. So growing up, the message in terms of firearms to me was, you know, the only people who have guns are police officers and bad guys. And, you know, so it was sort of like a fear that I had of firearms. Since becoming involved in the brief, I mean, the issue of our clients being arrested and prosecuted the way that they are was the primary reason that I joined. But after I did that, I did a lot of research into the African American tradition of bearing arms in this country, and I learned a lot about how many of our rights, all the way up, you know, from like the 1600s all the way up through the Civil Rights Movement, our lives and our rights were preserved through the use of firearms, the individual use of firearms in self-defense. And so that, for me, really sort of addressed any concerns that I had about it. Generally speaking, I know like the Black church and I guess liberals and, are against firearms, but I don't know that they have a clear understanding of the benefits that how firearms use has benefited us as a people. And so that was really what got me interested in it. And then after I learned about that, I decided that I need to figure out, or I need to learn about gun safety, how to properly use a gun, so that I'm not just speaking about laws and reading, you know, history books, but I actually, you know, can kind of walk the walk as well as talk the talk.
Bringing them
So
in,
I'm very
one at a
excited.
time, that's right.
I'm very excited to sort of begin on this journey
I love it.
and take it seriously, and see where it takes me.
You're gonna be brought into a wonderful sorority of willing black women that is, you guys make me so proud. Like as a firearm instructor, I'm just, okay, I'm a little jaded, okay, rightfully so. But I just think it is a magnificent sight to see a black woman with a firearm on her hip and that knows how to use it. I just don't want you to have a gun on your hip walking around here looking foolish. But it is something to see the attitude and the energy and the confidence that I see in the sisters on the range, especially ones in the competition area, and how confident and what it does for your confidence. Because I'm gonna just make a statement and we're gonna go on. Because here I've discovered in New York, a lot of the brothers, or a lot of the men, they don't encourage the women to get their firearms. Present company excluded. But for the majority, the women can get their gun permits because they really don't run into many problems with the law. So you are in a wonderful position. And I encourage every woman in here who has not had a run-in with the law, take advantage of this conversation and then sign up with me and we're gonna get you in the right place. Take advantage of this meeting. Take advantage of what is going on here. Don't just sit here. This is just not a feel-good meeting. This is not a coming together just to sit around here and just upon, you know, talk about firearms. We have to be proactive. Be proactive. Be proactive.
I just wanted to, you mentioned confidence, and I wanted to kind of speak about that. Another one of the reasons that I was interested in pursuing, you know, gaining greater knowledge around firearms is that when we signed onto the brief, we got a lot of backlash, and there were many people I was seeing, you know, black men, and not just around the Second Amendment issue, right, but around like police violence issues, literally crying on television, you know, begging, you know, white people to stop killing us. It's disgusting, right? And so, I mean, I understand where the fear comes from, and it's very sad, but we have to decide at some point if we are going to acquiesce our rights, right? And when it comes to the Second Amendment, many people are willing to do it voluntarily, you know, believing that it's going to somehow make us safer, which is crazy. And so I was seeing that sort of willingness, that fear and that willingness to give it up, and I decided, you know, we have to decide as a people if we're going to stand up, right, and face potentially dying, or just lay down and let them kill us. And I'm not advocating that we train and go fight,
Yes, you
police or
are.
the government. But what I'm saying is, if they're gonna come for us, we need to stand up, we need to be ready, right? Instead of being like, we don't have guns, who are we gonna call? And so I think that that's very important. That's really sort of the driving force behind it, is like this idea that we need to, as a people, be self-determined and confident.
Come on now.
Right, and then in the training, I see it in this gentleman down here on the end, there's a sense of ownership of your life and of what's happening around you and control that we just kind of don't have collectively.
You want to speak, Brother Earl? What you got?
Please. First and foremost, I just want to say Martin made progress when Malcolm grabbed the gun. So let's first understand that.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
Okay, but one of the things I want to know is this class action suitable? Okay, if there's a clear pattern of discriminatory judgments as it relates to obtaining licenses that can be clearly defined along racial lines, what I have found historically is that one of the things that there's two things that gets respected in this matrix. That's fear and money, okay? So it's the reason for the restriction of those, obtaining those guns is to maintain a certain fear, okay? But I'm hoping that there is at least an option from the money standpoint, like we have to put pressure on them from multiple angles. So while we have our esteemed guests, I just want to know, like, what's the possibility of that, or does it make even sense to go down that road?
I do know that there are and have been many agencies, Firearms Policy Coalition, Gun Owners of America. I believe there are others that are constantly looking for people who were denied. The problem's going to come from they've now indicated that you should not have been denied. Now you have to try to put a dollar amount on what your damages are. Ultimately, these are very expensive lawsuits. We're not talking hundreds of thousands. Like, you could spend $500,000, $1 million. They're going to fight you all the way. But again, if there's a group, if you can get everybody can get connected, and you have a list of 50, 100, 2,000, then I'm sure that there are organizations, and I do know that there are African American gun owners that I assume would be the ones that would want to take something like this on in the event the more national. Unfortunately, it may be a case where that would be the avenue to go down. But if you have a group of people, instead I have 2,000 plaintiffs, NRA, although in the past the NRA has buckled when there was a situation where they could have stood up, when there was I'm going to say his name was Castillo, was a situation where you would have expected them to say something, and then they didn't say anything. So if you get enough people together,
we can do it.
Maybe.
Because from a local politics standpoint, to me, if we made this an issue on the local level, like, I'm not even thinking about voting for you unless you, okay, like, don't even knock on our door. We're not saying this is a main issue, because if you're saying it is just the money's going to take to even carry forfeit, then we have to start on the local, like, miss me with the other stuff. What are you going to do about this? We want a clear answer.
There are people who have Second Amendment as their single issue voters, and if you over time, first of all, more people have to come out to vote. New York historically, under 31% of the voting population votes in the state of New York. So if everyone who didn't vote actually voted, you would win 2-1. But of the people who are voting, if you come together and tell people, this is what I care about, and then if they don't, you put up your own candidate, you raise money, you don't give them money, you can change the message. But right now, the politicians, especially in New York City, they believe that guns, there's only one thing to say about guns, which is no one should have any guns. That's sort of what they believe, and they've been running on that. It's been a sort of a Democratic talking point for a long time.
Brother Earl, I wanted to say something to you. You said Martin made progress when Malcolm picked up the gun. Martin Luther King was denied his gun permit, then they blew up his father's house.
Yeah.
I don't know what the progress was.
No, but what I'm saying is that, you know, the classic adage is good cop, bad cop, right?
Indeed.
And they painted Malcolm, the bad cop, you know, that iconic picture with the gun, and they gave Martin they acquiesced and allowed him to have certain platforms. So the point I'm making is that until we make this such a point of having guns, like it's a clear point, then we'll have some conversation on this other side of the ledger, okay? We have to make it a clear, like it's a line in the sand.
This is interesting, and I'm going to talk to you, and we'll talk to you later, because I told you you and I are going to talk. You and I are going to include every member here. We're going to bring them back, and we're going to sit down, and we're going to talk the next phase of the plan of bringing the community together. Remember, this thing has levels. This is not the end. You know, we're going to have spot speaking.
Yeah, just one thing I want to be careful on. You know, when we're talking about Second Amendment, black people, I implore you to not adopt the white man's mentality on all these things that just because they on the right love guns, right? We cannot. What I find with us, we go into these areas, we go into this realm of guns, and then we want to start talking the same talk that white people talk when it comes to guns. We can love guns, we can train with guns. We do not have to adopt the mentality that they have. You see what they did with Philando Castile when he got murdered. NRA did nothing. Right? We've got to be careful. I get it. You know, we want to perpetuate, you know, us and guns. We want to erase that fear that we've had, which I want to tell you is okay, right? I had that fear when I first started. It's normal. You're talking about an explosion in your hand, and you already know how the police are, right? So that fear we should have, and I get it, and it's normal. But I don't, like, when you have, like, Corleone, New York, right?
I'm sorry, can you use the mic, please?
Sorry. When you have people like Corleone, New York, great, he does great in demoing guns and all of that, but all they do, he's a puppet for the right-hand side, right? So they tell him to speak on this, speak on that, and what they always do is they put a black face to represent white supremacy. So we've got to be careful on, yes, we want to go into guns, we want to understand these things, we want to master these things, but we cannot adopt the mentality that they have. We can do it differently without adopting their mentality. So I get it. You know, we want to perpetuate this thing, but we need to stay true to ourselves as black people. Right? And don't get caught up in this whole, and I see it all the time. Like, there's very few of us at these matches. And the ones that we do see, they don't know who they are anymore. They're running the snake. What's the don't tread on me on their jerseys and stuff like that. Like, bro, you know what that's about? Do you know what that represents? They just gave it to me. Okay, well, just understand. So yeah, I just wanted to add to that. As we're talking about, you know, the amendments and voting and all that type of stuff. Listen, if we're gonna hold, you know, feet to the fire, we got to make sure we do that and maintain who we are, not adopt their mentality.
Yes, Bobby.